The opening address this morning has the subject limits to the revival of boundaries. And it's a very great honor for us that Dr. Hans-Rudolf Merz has agreed to come and give this opening address. Mr. President, it's a great honor for us that you're here. Dr. Merz is, I think it's fair to say, a local man. You come from Appenzell Ausserrhoden, which is, or Ausserrhoden, maybe. Better still. So in a sense, this morning he's playing on home ground to people who are very sympathetic to, I'm sure, what he's going to tell us. Dr. Merz, throughout his career, has on the one hand been involved in politics, starting in this area, being the secretary of the Free Democratic Party, and at the same time having a great involvement in business as a business consultant, and having risen to be on the boards of leading Swiss companies. In 2003, he was elected to the Federal Council, and in 2004, he took up the position of the head of the Federal Department of Finance. At the end of last year, he was elected as the president of the Swiss Confederation. I think today any Minister of Finance in any country has enormous problems, and he has huge responsibilities. It's a very difficult time for anyone in this position, and for you to give up time to come and address us like this is for us, therefore, a double honor. Mr. President.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Lord, I'm really coming from Appenzell, and I like these cowbells, so I will speak very long time until you make them shake. But first of all, it gives me a great pleasure to address you here at the university today to this 39th symposium. Being at this symposium is somewhat coming home, as you said, as I studied here myself in the 60s, and I worked while completing my doctorate in one of the institutes of the University of St. Gallen. So I'm very familiar with the places. And the atmosphere of the University of St. Gallen affected us at that time for a number of ways. Firstly, the international nature of the university taught us to think beyond borders, true to the motto of this year's symposium. Secondly, the outstanding faculty revealed to us the connections between economy, the state, society, and the individual. I shall never forget in my life the guest lectures given here by Ludwig Erhard, the father of the social market economy. He would certainly have a few things to say today. The social market economy is a system based on private ownership, on freedom of contract and competition as a prerequisite for prosperity in society. And the market economy must be socially responsible so that excesses do not lead to collectivism. The state should be strong, I agree. However, it should be lean. And this credo has been with us through phases of upturn, of downturn, or even of crisis since World War II. At its core, the social market economy has maintained its form, its structure, but it has proven to be dynamic, and it has been adapted. It is the only economic system that enables market forces to regain their equilibrium and to satisfy individual needs. With that in mind, we should refrain from overly hasty interventions and interventionism, or the urge to unleash waves of regulations. This view is particularly topic. Confronted with a global economic crisis, new boundaries are sprouting up in our open world. Economic boundaries are mainly the result of ever scarcer resources. Political boundaries are the result of an increasing need for state, or even the nation state. I will explore three issues threatened by the emergence of such boundaries: the economic crisis in general, the financial markets in particular, and lastly, international cooperation. And I will outline what the limits of these boundaries should be if we are to maintain our free world order. So first, the global and the Swiss economy. I will start with the global economic crisis. Advanced economies are facing the deepest recession since the Second World War we all know about, and I haven't go into details. And growth in emerging and developing countries has plummeted. The outlook for 2009 is bleak. How have countries, however, responded to this crisis? To the extent that they were willing and able to act, governments have rolled out fiscal packages worth not only billions, as it has been mentioned in the initial remarks, but trillions of dollars. In addition, central banks have supplied ample liquidity, and these efforts have been reinforced by complementary lending from international financial institutions. The Swiss government and the Swiss National Bank have taken decisive measures as well to dampen the effects of the crisis. And while the Swiss National Bank has significantly eased monetary conditions, the federal government has launched 2 fiscal packages, and additional measures are under discussion today. We have designed these packages to guarantee an effective use of resources, safeguard jobs, and to promote investment in infrastructure. These were our aims. However, let me stress clearly that the usefulness of fiscal spending as a remedy against the crisis is limited. Every dollar that a state spends first has to be earned by ourselves, the taxpayers. Otherwise, the debt is passed on to future generations. In other words, to you, dear students. The limits of economic policy need, therefore, to be clear. The primary task of economic policy remains to provide a reliable framework for sustained growth, fair competition, and for innovation. I therefore remain committed to preserving and strengthening Switzerland's position as a leading business location, to advancing fiscal reforms, and to ensuring a sound budget. Within such framework, the private sector takes center stage. You, as future CEOs, so do I hope at least, take center stage. Economic recovery will require structural adjustments and new business models, and that's a challenge for all of you. We should therefore look upon the crisis as an opportunity to step up innovation and to find new solutions. Secondly, the financial sector. A key prerequisite for economic recovery, however, is renewed trust in financial system. Trust in financial system. As you are well aware, the financial sector was at the core of this crisis, and banks all over the world have had their share of global losses, Switzerland being no exception. We have witnessed unprecedented losses in asset values and major strains on financial markets. Uncertainty has led to a near collapse of interbank markets. Governments and central banks, both all over the world, have stood up these challenges and have intervened in numerous ways. Banks have been put in receivership, something that would have been not accepted 1 year ago. And calls for more state intervention are still today omnipresent. Switzerland has had its own prominent case with UBS. So in October last year, the federal government, the Swiss National Bank, and the Financial Markets Supervisory Authority took vital steps to restore confidence in UBS. Toxic assets were identified, afterwards valued, and then taken off the balance sheet of the bank. The core capital base was thereby strengthened. As far as possible, our measures have been aligned with market principles, and we have intentionally limited state intervention in management decisions, which to me is important. As an example, the government's capital injection was granted as a convertible bond with a 12.5% interest rate, which is not bad. We have now reached the stage where strategic decisions have to be made about the future shape of global finance. And there have been numerous calls for greater regulation. G20 leaders, for instance, called for a wide extension of regulation and oversight. It has already been mentioned. But financial markets are already highly regulated. So the answer is not more, but better regulation. Let me take up some points on this matter. First, current measures clearly have to be seen as exceptional. And we will have to develop a coordinated exit strategy that can be implemented as soon as possible and as soon as the economic situation permits. Despite the current crisis, we should not forget the advantages of privately organized markets and privately organized enterprises. Political and economic lines have been blurred for the sake of systemic stability. Once stability has been restored, however, we must redraw the diving line. Second, our measures should aim at preventing future crises. Yet we must carefully consider the costs and the benefits of each regulatory measure. The regulatory framework needs to strike a balance between enforcing financial prudence and leaving room for financial innovation. Third, the crisis has once again underlined the need for international cooperation. Cooperation in order to supervise systemic and internationally active financial institutions. Switzerland will continue to contribute to improving such regulation and supervision at the international level, for example, as a member of the Financial Stability Board. This brings me to the last and the third part of my talk, ladies and gentlemen, the challenge for international cooperation. We are all in the same boat. Our economies are closely interlinked due to globalization, or thanks to globalization. Therefore, overcoming the crisis will require a common effort. On the one hand, a variety of forums, maybe sometimes too much, have stepped up their work to improve cooperation among countries to counter the financial crisis. Pledges have been made to resist protectionism and to promote global trade and global investment. Additional resources are under discussion for the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, based on Washington, the Multilateral Development Bank, based in Washington, and trade finance. Several institutions are developing recommendations for a variety of regulatory issues and even for early warnings system. On the other hand, as you will have followed in the media, the international tax dialogue has become more of a monologue lately. In this regard, the questionable procedure of listing countries based on rather arbitrary benchmarks risks dividing the international community. That's why it requires a new discussion on it. Furthermore, some governments have opted for protectionist measures, have raised tariffs, or designed their stimulus programs to favor domestic firms. Mercantilism, ladies and gentlemen, may seem a favorable solution in a crisis, but history has shown that it is not. On the fringes of a recent IMF meeting in London, the CNN reporter, when he came in front of me, didn't ask for my views on the fate of banking secrecy, like all other journalists at the time do. Instead, he wanted to know if the foreign exchange measures taken by our Swiss National Bank did not count as protectionism. He was also the only member of the media on the lookout for specific examples. The others, meanwhile, were content to reel out the usual stereotype, saying there must be no return to protectionism in the face of the global economic crisis, and so on, blah, blah, blah. Indeed, that is what the whole world is demanding. But when it comes to defending one's own interests, the most treasured principles tend to be disregarded. In the case of our central bank, the answer was straightforward. The move by the Swiss National Bank to purchase foreign exchange was intended to prevent an undue appreciation of the Swiss franc. It amounts to a tightening of monetary conditions as an appreciation of the franc would put the government's objectives of price stability at risk. And this is the main task of Swiss National Bank. In any case, it does not affect Switzerland's commitment to a flexible exchange rate regime. So Switzerland remains fully committed to a free and open global economy. To this end, we remain convinced that free trade benefits all partners. In the midst of a crisis, mutual dependence may seem like a pitfall, yet dependence calls for cooperation. And through cooperation, we will overcome the crisis. So let us limit the boundaries that pose a threat to openness. With dynamism, creativity, and optimism, we will emerge stronger from crisis. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I am sorry, but now it's time for the project.
Mr. President, that was a fantastic speech. Really fantastic. But maybe we can break the plan. Always a good thing to get rid of planning. In the spirit of the President, why don't we have 2 or 3 questions, and then Mr. Smith. You know, I'm now in the dark again. I wonder if we can just have some... That's great. Who wants to ask the President the first question? I can see you're all...
Good morning, sir. Okay, I am a student, so I have really limited knowledge. But you mentioned that there should be measures that should be placed to control future crises, but this should take up an innovative as well as being mindful of the costs in implementing it. However, I just wonder, each crisis for every single region or country is different. So how do we really put a measure that can be used in the future if future crisis is actually different?
Well, this is a question that we have been discussing within our government for a long time. And I think there are 2 ways of facing a crisis. The first one is to have measures of urgency. As I described, the interventions we had in economies in order to have infrastructural investments, in order to save jobs, to maintain jobs, in order to bring economy running, which were immediate actions to be taken, which effects already in a short time, which was determined to be effecting in 2009 and probably in 2010, investments into railways, into highways, and so on. The other line is the regulatory measures seen, and there I must say I agree with the question because it cannot be answered. Every crisis that we have had since 1900 has had a different character. So no financial crisis is exactly the same as the last wars. So it might be impossible to have an outlook already for what measures could be preventively taken to prevent another crisis. So the regulatory system for the time being is focused on framework measures. And there I agree fully to say that, for instance, some regulatory measures for capital, for capitalizing banks and so on, I fully agree to have such kind of regulatory framework. However, if it's going into detail like economic policies, like business applications, like products, like single product, I think it wouldn't make sense. And there is a certain danger. When I learned yesterday, when I got to know that in European Union, Parliament is going to decide on the level of products and regulation near products of banking and financing, I think this is a danger because thereby you kill success, you kill development, you kill new businesses, and this is a danger. So I think there are no strict rules for prevention of future crises. However, you have good measures to intervene when a crisis is there.
One further question. Person up there. Gentleman, I think. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Maybe we can get a microphone to him? Thank you for taking the question.
Thank you very much for the chance. I'm also a student, so my knowledge is also limited. My name is Sofwan. I came from Indonesia, and I would like to point out some questions. For the first, I would like to highlight your statement that on the term of social market economy. The debate on the economic system usually made a face-off between government and the market. But what I would like to say here is that probably in this economic system, we should put more attention to the third actor, to the civil society. If the government control too much, it will limit the creativity. But if government, if there is another actor who has the independence and the strength to make the private sectors more responsible, I think it will be very helpful to keep the economy, to keep the whole economic system in check, to be responsible. So,
can I say that was a wonderful statement, and if I was now a professor, I'd say discuss.
Yeah, I mean...
So can I say, this isn't the time for speeches.
Yes.
You really made a statement. I'd very much like to ask the President to comment on it. Thank you very much indeed.
But, however, I have understood it as a question, and I would like to answer to you, saying that, as a matter of fact, the social market economy has to go in line with democracy. And civil society should be integrated into democracy. And the need of civil society has to be represented by the procedures of democracy. That's the way how it has to run. And each country has its decision-making processes. And each country has an outline of its democratic system. So in Switzerland, it goes within. Social market economy is based on democratic procedures. And that's where the social society has to be represented and has to give voice to the system, to the decisions in politics.
May we give a huge thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Mr. President.